What happens when a 102-year-old woman walks into a council meeting to defend a black couple denied their dream home? You won't believe how one forgotten clause in an old contract turns the entire system upside down. It was one of those Atlanta mornings when the sun didn't rise. It slapped you across the face, the kind of heat that laughs at ceiling fans and makes your coffee feel like a joke. And yet, Tamara Wilson stood at the bathroom mirror, adjusting her earrings with the kind of precision you reserve for a courtroom or a funeral. Not because she was fancy. Lord knows she wasn't in it for style points. But today she had to look flawless. Flawless for who? That realtor? The one who smiled like she practiced it in a mirror while listening to smooth jazz and microaggressions? Please, Tamara wasn't stupid. She'd seen that look before. Across job interviews, bank counters, and PTA meetings she donated to, but was never invited into. Still, she pinned those gold hoops with a deep breath and turned toward the living room. Kevin, her husband, was already working through the buttons on a soft blue shirt. Not white. He didn't want it to look like they were begging. That was his idea. Don't dress like you're applying. We're not applicants. We're buyers, equals. But he knew better. Equal only existed on paper, and only if the ink hadn't dried crooked. They were headed to what was supposed to be their first home. Not a rental, not a converted garage unit that smelled like wet paint and roaches. A real damn home. A 2-story white-trimmed beauty on a corner lot, with a front porch wide enough for family photos and Sunday lemonade. That tree in the yard? Perfect for a swing. Tamara taught first grade, poured her heart into kids whose names she remembered long after their parents stopped showing up. Kevin had taken care of his mother after a stroke for 6 straight years while holding down shifts as a delivery driver. No days off, no shortcuts. Every dollar in their savings account had a scar. And now here they were, pulling up to the curb like something out of a catalog. The air smelled like pine mulch and entitlement. Mrs. Chapman was already at the gate, clutching her folder like a cross between a Stepford wife and a guidance counselor with a superiority complex. White, tight ponytailed, blazer buttoned too high like she was worried morals might spill out. "Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. Wilson," she chirped, lips tight as a jar lid. Not a wrinkle in sight, except the one between her brows that screamed, "We have a problem." Kevin held the paperwork in one hand. Pre-approval letter, down payment confirmation, credit history clean enough to eat off of. Every document lined up like a row of obedient soldiers. "We're ready to sign," he said, calm, measured. "We have everything here." And that's when it happened. 1 second, that's all it took. Mrs. Chapman's face twitched. Just a flicker. Like a system glitch in a customer service robot. You could almost hear the processing error beeping behind her eyes. "I actually just received an update from the neighborhood council," she said, pulling a sheet of paper she'd clearly been clutching since sunrise. "Unfortunately, new residency guidelines have come into effect. According to our community standards, home purchases are prioritized for families with established ties to the neighborhood." The way she said established ties felt like code, and Tamara heard it loud and clear. Her eyes locked on Chapman's with a stare that could peel paint off walls. "What kind of ties?" Tamara asked, voice low and tight. "We're approved. We're funded. That house is on the market." Chapman's eyes darted sideways. Her fingers dug into the folder like it might rescue her. "I'm just relaying what the council decided. These changes were passed to ensure we preserve the character of the community." Kevin's jaw flexed. Not anger. He was past that. This wasn't rage. This was the cold, biting realization that your dream was never yours to begin with. "You're telling us," he said slowly, "that we're being denied this home, based on a rule that doesn't exist online, wasn't disclosed in the listing, and only came up now, when we're standing here with a contract and a cashier's check?" "I'm sorry," Chapman said, voice dry as burnt toast. "It's not personal." "Oh, I'm sure it's not," Tamara snapped, her sarcasm sharp enough to draw blood. "Nothing ever is. It's just how things are." She took a step closer. "Let me guess. Every time a black couple makes it to the finish line, the council moves it another mile?" The silence was thick. On the porch across the street, an old white woman, easily past 100, stood with a cane, eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. She didn't blink. She didn't hide. She just watched. When Kevin and Tamara turned to leave, the woman took one slow step forward on the porch. No words, no expressions, just the kind of gaze that makes you wonder what she's lived through, or what she's about to do. Back in the car, the windows fogged despite the AC. Tamara stared out in silence, hands trembling just enough to notice. Kevin kept both hands on the wheel, but his voice when it came was steady. "This isn't a mix-up," he said. "This is the machine working exactly the way it was built." "I'm tired of being the glitch in their system," Tamara whispered. "We do everything right, every single thing, and the goalpost moves, again, and again, and again." He nodded, slow and solemn. "They think this is over," he said, "but we've got more in us." And just like that, the sky outside shifted. That sticky drizzle, the kind that doesn't soak you, just irritates your soul, started tapping on the windshield. Not a storm, not yet, but something was coming, something they didn't expect. What happened next changed everything. You don't want to miss how a 102-year-old woman turned the system on its head. Stay tuned, the fire's just getting started. Monday, 8:42 a.m. The apartment smelled like yesterday's rice and quiet disappointment. It was the kind of smell you don't notice until you realize your hopes got boxed up a little too early. One of those boxes sat by the door, taped and labeled like a promise that got rejected without a callback. Tamara stood at the window in her robe, staring blankly at her phone. Legal aid email? Unanswered. Complaint to the city council? Radio silence. A tweet tagging the local news station? No retweets, not even a pity like. The kind of digital void that felt personal. Heavy, thick silence, like a locked door behind a smiling face. Kevin sat on the edge of the bed, flipping through the same stack of papers he'd been reviewing for 2 days straight. Income verified, credit score shining, background check cleaner than a polished countertop. So clean, it started to feel suspicious. Because when a black couple checks all the boxes, folks start asking who they had to know to pull that off. And then, knock knock. Not the doorbell. Not the impatient banging of a delivery guy. Just two slow, polite, deliberate knocks. The kind that carried weight. The kind that said, "I know you're home." Kevin opened the door without even checking the peephole. What for? The building had cameras, and standing on the other side wasn't a threat. It was a white woman, old. Like pre-World War II old. Dressed like she was heading to court, not for a casual stroll. Her silver hair was pinned up, and she clutched a worn cardboard box like it held both history and vengeance. "You Mr. Wilson?" she asked, voice calm but strong. Kevin nodded. "Yes, ma'am." "May I come in for a moment?" Tamara appeared behind him, barefoot, still in her robe, looking exactly how a black woman looks when life tries her patience before coffee. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. Her eyes said, "This better be good." "I heard," the woman said, stepping inside like she paid rent there, "that you were denied the opportunity to purchase my family's home." Tamara raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" "I'm Margaret Ellington," she continued. "That house was built by my parents in 1939. I grew up in it, married in it, buried my husband after 52 years of marriage in it. I sold it in 1996. But when I did, I made sure to include a clause. One line. Tiny but legally binding." She gently placed the box on the dining table, pulled out a weathered envelope, and opened it with the care of someone who had waited decades for the right moment. She read aloud, "If at any point in the future a sale or refusal of sale is found to be based on discrimination due to race, religion, or gender, the original owner reserves the right to revoke or halt said transaction." The room fell silent. So silent, even the refrigerator buzz felt dramatic. "You're saying you can cancel their decision?" Kevin asked. Margaret didn't blink. "I'm not saying I can. I'm saying I will." She slid over a second folder, certified copies, notarized signatures, a letter from her attorney, and yes, that same clause, clear as daylight. You could have framed it like a declaration of war. Tamara stared, speechless. "Why?" she finally asked. Why step in? Margaret took a breath. Her face softened. Her voice didn't. Because I've watched this neighborhood twist itself into knots trying to stay comfortable. Community character, preservation of standards, that's code. Always has been. They say it like a compliment, but it stinks like a lie. Kevin cracked a grin for the first time in days. Mrs. Ellington, you're something else. I'm old, she snapped. That means I get to speak freely. No job to lose, no reputation left to polish, just the truth. And I'm tired of pretending that people don't know exactly what they're doing when they hide behind procedures. The next day, she marched into the real estate office like a general entering a war room. Not alone either. She brought backup, a local news crew, rolling cameras, live mic. Tamara and Kevin trailed behind her, not saying a word. They didn't have to. Mrs. Chapman, seated at her desk, froze the moment the cameras came out. Her professional smile faltered, just enough to reveal the panic underneath. I'm here, Margaret announced, to file a formal demand that the transaction on the Wilson home be suspended, pending investigation into racially motivated interference. She laid the paperwork on the desk. The mic was close enough to pick up the shuffle of pages. The reporter leaned in, eyes wide. Are you absolutely certain, Mrs. Ellington? She looked dead at him. Son, I remember when black folks weren't allowed to shop at my family's grocery store. I've seen the same excuses roll through this town for 80 years in different suits and different tones. And I'm telling you, when a smiling realtor waves a new policy at a black couple with all their paperwork in order, that's not just shady, that's a pattern. It took hours, minutes online. The news blew up. 102-year-old former homeowner confronts discriminatory sale block. Atlanta's living legend shuts down HOA bias. Margaret Ellington, still kicking, still taking names. TikTok ate it up. Hashtag, #granny with receipts. CNN ran a segment before lunch. Even a House representative retweeted a clip. And just like that, the neighborhood council that had been so certain about their new rules started scrambling. Emergency meetings were called. Lawyers were summoned. Concerned residents started calling in. Not because they were outraged, but because they'd been caught, and now they had to pretend. We're simply trying to preserve the integrity of our community, said Councilwoman Pearson on camera. The station cut to a map. 342 homes. Not a single black homeowner. Preserve what exactly? The anchor deadpanned. The status quo? Meanwhile, Kevin and Tamara were prepping. No lawyers yet, but mentally, they were ready. Ready to walk into that chamber with the weight of truth on their side and a grandma with paperwork leading the charge. If they shut us down again, Kevin said, tightening his tie, we go public, full throttle, press lawsuits, whatever it takes. Tamara nodded, slipping in her earrings, the same ones she wore the day they were denied. Today, she said, we go in there with the one thing they didn't expect, an old woman who remembers everything. City Hall wasn't built for drama. It creaked, it echoed, it tried to be neutral. But that morning it buzzed. People packed in like it was the Super Bowl, phones out, cameras ready. Margaret walked in first, trench coat, cane, folder under arm, that same look of controlled thunder. Kevin and Tamara followed side by side, quiet but unbreakable. The neighborhood council looked like they'd swallowed sandpaper. Let's begin, the chairman said. Oh, it was already beginning. This is it, the showdown. You've waited for it, and it's all happening in the final chapter. Don't blink. Margaret's about to rewrite history. The municipal hearing hall was usually as dull as a diet cracker. Brown walls, long wooden tables, and those padded chairs that groaned like they had regrets. Meetings dragged on for hours with sleepy voices reciting ordinances like bedtime stories for bureaucrats. But not today. Today it was standing room only. Neighbors, bloggers, aunties in church hats, kids with phones. Everybody came to see a 102-year-old woman throw a grenade at the system and do it in heels. Front row, dead center, sat Kevin and Tamara. He was crisp in a blue dress shirt, calm on the outside, but locked and loaded. Tamara sat upright, her face a mix of quiet thunder and absolute control. Even the air in the room seemed nervous. The chair of District 51 tapped the mic like he wasn't sure it worked. "We now open the hearing regarding the halted property transaction on 15th Avenue, he mumbled, sounding more like a tired accountant than the voice of the community. Mrs. Chapman was seated off to the side, lips clenched so tight they nearly disappeared. Her blazer screamed, "Composed!" But her eyes were begging for a fire escape. And then the double doors opened. In walked Margaret Ellington, not just a woman, not just a senior. She walked in like a verdict. Cane in one hand, thick folder in the other, dressed in a muted gray suit that whispered business. Her back was straight, her stare was sharp, and the hush that fell over the room, instant. "My name is Margaret Ellington," she said as she stepped up to the podium. "I've lived in this neighborhood for 87 years. I am here to formally protest the council's obstruction of the home sale to Mr. and Mrs. Wilson on the grounds of racial discrimination." Silence, then a low murmur rippled through the audience. She flipped a page. "In 1996, when I sold the home on 15th Avenue, I included Clause 17.3 in the property transfer agreement. It states that if, at any point, the sale or refusal of sale is found to be discriminatory on the basis of race, religion, or gender, the original owner may nullify the agreement and return the property to provisional status." The council chair cleared his throat like he'd swallowed something wrong. "Ms. Ellington, with all due respect," he began, "we understand your position, but we're simply following updated community standards." "Standards," she interrupted, "are what people hide behind when they're afraid to say the real word. And that word today is discrimination." You could hear the snap of phones recording. The front row shifted. Even the stenographer paused her typing. The young council attorney stood up, clearly ready to take on a woman he thought was just sentiment wrapped in wrinkles. "Ma'am, even if such a clause exists, it would not override the current council procedures." "It does override them," she cut in, "because it was filed with the Land Records Office, notarized, and unlike your neighborhood guidelines, it wasn't drafted over brunch by folks who never had to fight for housing." Then she pulled the ace. From her folder, she removed a clean, certified copy of the agreement, official seal, stamped, with the original buyer's signature. The crowd leaned in. That signature? It belonged to the grandfather of the man who now sat on the council board. Kevin sat forward. Tamara clenched her hands, the air thickened. "I am formally requesting that the council reverse its decision," Margaret said, "and reinstate the Wilsons' purchase. If not, I am prepared to file a civil rights lawsuit, contact federal housing authorities, and provide this documentation to the Washington Post, which I assure you I still have friends at." You could have heard a pen drop, or more accurately, you could hear Mrs. Chapman's confidence drop straight through the floor. She opened her mouth to speak, something about a misunderstanding, but by then the room had already shifted. The chair glanced at his colleagues. The attorney swallowed hard, and in a move that would have been historic if it wasn't so overdue, they folded. "In light of new legal documentation," the chair said, struggling to keep his tone steady, "this council sees no justification to obstruct the Wilson purchase. The decision is hereby reversed. The sale will proceed as originally approved." The room exploded. Not just applause, cheers, snaps, praise hands, a shout from the back. "That's how you do it, Miss Margaret." Tamara's eyes filled and she pressed her hand to her mouth to keep the tears in place. Kevin stood up slowly, walked to Margaret, and, without a word, bowed. "You didn't just save this sale," he said. "You cracked the wall wide open." Margaret gave him a nod. That quiet, seasoned nod people give when they've been fighting longer than you've been alive. A nod that said, "You earned this. Now hold it." A week later, Kevin and Tamara carried the last of their boxes up the steps of their new home. The sun was shining like it had something to prove. White shutters, maple tree in the front yard, porch big enough to hold a generation. A note hung on the mailbox written in cursive, "Welcome home, the Wilson family." Margaret pulled up just as they were placing a family photo on the mantel. She came bearing a shoebox full of black and white photographs of the neighborhood. Kids on bikes, barbecues from the 60s, her late husband holding her hand on that very porch. "Keep the history," she said, "and don't let them bury it under all that fake niceness." Tamara hugged her, long and full of gratitude. Kevin watched kids blowing bubbles across the street, and for the first time in years, didn't feel like something could be snatched away. And here's the twist nobody saw coming. A month later, the same neighborhood council held another vote. Quiet, no press, no stream. They struck the priority residency clause from their policies, called it standard review. But everyone knew they didn't remove it out of goodwill. They removed it because one great-grandmother with legal receipts was scarier than any lawyer. So the next time someone tells you it's just the way things are, or change takes time, you look them dead in the eye and say, sometimes all it takes is one old woman, one dusty contract, and the guts to show up when it counts. This was never just about a house. It was about who gets to belong. And thanks to Miss Margaret Ellington, now everybody knows the answer.